Special programs, and the one that we have today is kind of the culmination of several we've had in the past year, kind of leading up to this one, and of the history of and families. We're all about families and their histories, and you get to know your people. And so many people in Paulding County are kin to each other that it makes it fun. And so we know about their characteristics, but we're going to be talking about that today. And but before we get into our program and a little bit of history on our organization, before we start, I'm going to ask Freddie Henderson in the back, if he would, to lead us in our Pledge of Allegiance. Ask everybody to stand if you don't mind. And then Lamar Wadsworth, who is our chaplain for our organization, to lead us in prayer.
Attention, salute, pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let us pray. Father, thank you for the beauty of this day and its opportunities. May we use it wisely. Thank you for all those in years past who worked to make this community a better place. We thank you for those who do so today. We pray your blessing on our meeting today. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you. I want to tell you just a little bit about what we've been doing with our programs. We started our programs last year, and we missed a couple of them in recording, but we've been recording all of them this year. And we may have a couple of those programs back so we can re-record them, although we took some notes and all, but it's nothing like having it on this. Brian, our vice president of our organization, does all the digitizing and recording and leads us on that. We have other people involved in it too. Want to recognize Judge Vinson, who's here with our lead person today, Sharon, who's I asked her to kind of round up some of her illustrious members, which I'll get her to introduce in a moment, and of the Dallas Women's Club. Those of you that are from Paulding County understand that the Dallas Women's Club goes back a long way, and it was crucial for the women of this county to get together, and so many of them had great leadership qualities to, after all, they helped their husbands succeed. Without them, they couldn't succeed. And we really, whatever it is they wanted is the agenda that would take place, of course. But I want to share with you a couple of the famous ladies that we've talked about in some of our programs. We talked about Ruth Hutchins, who is the daughter of Judge Bartlett and Ms. Watson, who he married, and so they're from the Bartlett family, and Sharon will talk about their connection with the Dallas Women's Club and funding and all. Most great organizations have a champion that helps them to fund things. or makes donations or whatever. And in that case, the Bartletts gave back to the community. We also talked about the Watson family. Half of Judge Bartlett, his wife was a Watson. And Bill Watson gave the program. All of his family has been in politics here for years. And but one of their members, Lucille Watson, was one of the famous things she did. Her husband was the head of the Department of Transportation for the state of Georgia. And but as Bill Watson shared with us, she was probably more famous because she went to Washington and testified before a congressional committee to get the lunch program in schools there. And because of her efforts, it happened. Now that was back in the days when you could talk to politicians and they were there to represent the people. And so it worked out good for her because she met some folks and influenced them. But she's from Paulding County. Miss Irma Matthews, as Bill Foster talked about, that was Dr. Joe's wife. She was the first school superintendent, the first elected woman in political office in Paulding County. And then, of course, Miss Ira Foster, Bill and John's mother from last month. A lot of people in this room, she was their librarian if you went to Dallas High School. And kind of like a second mother to me. And then we're going to talk a little bit today, and I've got some of the grandchildren here today that you've met, Maybelle McGarity, and she was part of the Hitchcock group. My grandmother was her sister, and most of them, including my grandmother, were teachers. And Enola Ragsdale and all of them, they all had different personalities. But Aunt Maybelle, as we'll refer to her, was quite a character, and we'll be talking about her today. We've had programs on Wayne Black, who was a professional baseball player, New York Giants, and later was the pharmacist, the lead pharmacist for everybody to hang out in Dallas. Mariana Cooper Cochran, her daddy was mayor of Dallas, and I had my first job, well, my second job there. My first job was cutting grass for Aunt Maybelle and others. And then the Watsons, and then a couple of months ago we had 4 90-year-olds here, and they discussed what it was like to, they graduated from high school, Dallas High, in 48 to 50, and what it was like to grow up during the Depression, to experience rationing, and grow up during World War II. They didn't serve, but they all went in the Army and Navy and served in the Korean War, but none of them actually went to the peninsula. They served in some capacity. But their highlight of their thing was to talk about athletics and how much it meant to them. They were all great athletes. One of them even played semi-pro ball for the Navy, not the Naval Academy, but during the Navy, the team. And his 2 years there, he averaged 7 yards a carry. That sounds like a professional to me. But they're all from Paulding County. And then we had John and Bill Foster talk about the Eberhardt family and the Foster family. And Judge Foster wrote the history of Paulding County in 2 volumes. He was in business with Hal Hutchins, who was the son-in-law of the Bartletts. So it's all interconnected, all of the genealogy here, and who you're kin to, and how important it is. But today we're honored to have Sharon Vinson, who's going to lead the charge, and I'll let her introduce her other distinguished folks here. And we're going to talk about how the Dallas Women's Club made a difference in Paulding County. And in so many ways. We're sitting here today and one of the beneficiaries of it. And so with that, Sharon's got things we're going to share here, and many things you can look at after it, and I think Dee, did we put your book over here? So Sharon, if you will, and whatever I can do to assist you.
Thank you. Well, I've had a good time looking at all the old minute books of the Women's Club. It's humbling to see how many times my name appears there, and I have no recollection of all this stuff. So anyway, what I know is what I've read. But who's here with me is Joanne Fudger, who joined the club a little before I did, maybe in the early 70s. I joined, I think, in the late 70s, and Dee McLean came, late 70s, came right after I did. And and let me just preface it. I've got pictures and stuff to pass around. I have a bunch of stuff to tell you about the history of the Women's Club and projects and all the things that we did. What's on the table over here is Dee brought an album that talks about the beginning of this library building and the Women's Club involvement in that. Behind that, well, let me say first, closest to Stephen, is a spiral notebook that's a list of the books that were in the original library that was in the clubhouse. I thought that was kind of cool, that little spiral notebook.
Good.
And then next to that is just a clipping about the library and Miss McGarity's scrapbook that goes from 1920 to mid-80s. And y'all, it's very fragile. So I wanted you to see it, but please be careful with it. Next to that, the blue notebook is just an example of the minute book. So we have the minutes of the Women's Club from 1920 until, last week. Next to that is another minute book that I think the Genealogical Society had preserved from the 1980s. And then all these papers in the front, a lot of that is lists of members of the Women's Club. And then there's some yearbooks there. Some of them are kind of fragile too. There's a list of the chair of choir from the Methodist Church that sang, and you'll, not Women's Club members, but you'll recognize some names there who were children at the time. It's over there, so I can't remember who they were. Brawleys and Covingtons, I think, are several of them that were in there. And then the very end of the table is just an example of what's been going on lately. That we're still here. We're still kicking. Anyway. 100, yeah, over 100 years. Yeah, 102 years old.
That's awesome.
Right. So I'd just like to say, if you're more interested in lists of who's in the club than you are in the thousands of projects that we did, feel free to go look at the lists. Anyway, and I have some pictures to pass around. I learned that from Bill Watson, that he just took pictures and passed them around, and you may be able to see them better if we just pass them. So, anyway, yes, there really is a Dallas Women's Club, and we really have members. I think we have about 7 members right now. Although we've had a few meetings lately, and we've had some past presidents who came and participated with us in looking at all this old stuff to glean out what might be interesting to share. So I'm going to tell you just at the very beginning what we're mainly about right now, and then we'll go back to the 20s and come forward decade by decade by decade. Personally, I think the 20s is the most interesting part of it, but anyway. So September 2019 was the 40th Paulding Meadows Arts and Crafts Festival, and that was the 40th year that the Dallas Women's Club sold hamburgers and hot dogs at that festival. So we were one of the founding organizations, and Dee can tell you more about it. She's real involved with the festival now. Served on the board. Several of us have served on the board of directors for all these years, and in return for serving on the board, as separate from the hamburger booth, in return for serving on the board, we get a cut of the gate receipts, and then that's the money that we have to give away. So for the last, 20, 25 years, that's the main thing we've done, is just work on that committee, get a cut of the gate receipts, and give that money away. The other thing we've done with the burger booth is that we bought everything for the booth, organized the booth, and this is for about the last 20 years, and then we got other groups to help us run it, people from schools, other civic groups, to bring in the manpower, because we didn't have the manpower. But we completely organized it, bought everything, and then whoever helped us run it got all of the proceeds from the burger booth. So that's, that's another just part of our philanthropy, is that kind of that legwork. So that's pretty much what we've been about for the last, 20 years or so. Now, let's go back in time though, to 1920. Maybe we should go back a little farther than that. 1914 is what I read was kind of Ms. McGarity's, the vision that she had. She was teaching in Boston, Georgia, and she saw them open their library. And she looked at that building, and in fact, there's a picture in the scrapbook where she's written in her handwriting, "This was my inspiration for the Dallas Women's Clubhouse." And so that was 1914. 1917, I think, was when the study club was organized, and then there was a matrons club, might have been organized a little bit before that. In 1920, she writes, let's see if I have a copy of that. No, it's just in there somewhere. It's in there somewhere. She had a soul-searching session. She said she put her 1-year-old down. Who's the oldest, y'all?
Jeanette was the
Jeanette,
oldest.
so it would have been Jeanette, because all she mentioned was the 1-year-old, so it must have been Jeanette. Put her down for a nap and had a soul-searching period of prayer, and was led after that to suggest that those two organizations, the study club and the matrons club, combined to form the Dallas Women's Federated Club. And then she invited people to her porch. I have a picture of her. Let me just pass this around. A picture of her on her porch, and she invited this group of ladies there. I'm not sure she told them ahead of time what it was about. The way the write-up reads is, when they all got there from these two clubs, because they kind of competed with each other. Yeah, and there were a few other things going on in one of the clubs that she wanted to squelch. Gossip, okay. And she said, "I brought you here because I'm going to suggest that our two organizations combine." And so she alone nominated the first slate of officers. And she was head of the study club, and Bertha Hart was head of the matrons club. And she wanted Bertha Hart to be first president of the Dallas Women's Federated Club. And then she nominated other people for the other offices. And she herself said, "I would like to be the corresponding secretary." And that was because she wanted to write the letters to ask for the money to build the clubhouse. And I think from the very beginning, maybe from 1914, her vision was to build this clubhouse in the middle of town, and it would be a public restroom, especially for ladies coming in. Everybody would come in from the country and spend the day in downtown Dallas, and the ladies needed a place to go and rest and nurse their babies in private. So the men were not in there. It was a ladies' restroom, and to be a library eventually. I think that was part of her vision from the very beginning. The library didn't happen until several years later. Anyway, that was the vision for the club. And I think Stephen mentioned Ms. McGarity. You just can't underestimate what the influence that she had on the club, the city of Dallas, Paulding County, and so many of us individually. They're just, I just look back and just some of my most formative years, I think maybe y'all too, were our, what we did with Ms. McGarity telling us what to do, and going with us. She couldn't drive. By the time I was in the club, I don't think she was driving anymore.
I don't think she ever drove.
Never drove,
Never.
okay. Well, so whatever she was doing, she was taking one of us with her. That's where they're taking her. And that was part of it. So, let's see. Let me look at my notes and see if I'm covering what I said. So the study club and the matrons club had kind of different purposes, but they combined. And the women's club has been involved in so many different kinds of activities. That's, I guess, one way that we've had so much influence is that we're involved in everything. We just do lots of different things. Let's see. Okay, yeah, the library in Boston, Georgia was a Carnegie library. Our library, I don't think was ever a Carnegie Library. It was WPA, is where some of the funds came for that. Let's see. And here is a picture of the clubhouse once it got built. This is a very short history that Ms. McGarity wrote. This tells you the organizing members. So that's kind of interesting. These are the very first members, and then all the people that were added in the first year. And I think by the end of the first year, there were 44 members. So they were working hard on getting the members. It's a little disconcerting to me that everyone who is married is referred to by their husband's names. So the list says at the top, Mesdames, or sometimes it just says Emily stands for Mesdames, and then all the names after that are men's names. unless you were single, like Ruth Bartlett, and then you were referred to by your real name. But anyway, so that's, if you want to look at that's what's in there, is that list of names. Pictures of the clubhouse. Once it got there. So just a few other things that happened in the 1920s. So there were, let's see. Oh, that picture of Miss McGarity that went around. She's standing behind her porch swing.
This one?
Yeah. That house, for anybody that doesn't know where it is, if you know where the Dallas Cemetery is, it's the third one coming back toward town from the cemetery. And then I think there are two more, and then the big house that James Kelly's building on the corner there. And I assume, whatever that is, it's huge.
It's big.
And I assumed that this was the same house where she was in 1920, standing behind her porch swing.
My grandfather made that porch swing.
How about that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had it for years, but I have to say it's gone now.
Oh. Yeah.
That was most recently Bruce Harris's house.
No, his was next door to that. His is the fourth one coming back toward it.
So that would be Judy Rakestrom's house.
Yeah, the Harris is still on that, on the.
Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, I didn't know that. Well, and y'all will hear that a lot. I don't know a lot. And not having grown up here, a lot of you know a lot more about the people from way back there. I can tell you about Flushing, New York. Anyway, trying to read that. Okay, going back again to the house. August 3, 1920 says the commissioners gladly consented to lease the lot to the club for 25 years. I think they were happy to have the club operate a restaurant on the corner and leased it to us for 25 years. So then there were all these fundraisers, in that first year. The clubhouse was built in a little bit less than a year. So they were working hard on that too. So that, and the clubhouse is the corner of Main Street and what was Ackworth Street then.
Across the street from the courthouse.
Across the street from the old courthouse. Mm-hmm. And, even then, the club was just, from the get-go, the club was just a force of community involvement, supporting, let's see what I'm quoting from the minutes, supported various causes and institutions to the betterment of women and children especially. There also was, let's see, helped, I take my glasses off. They built a low-cost clinic. They funded the Dallas Public School Library. They did Armistice Day programs every year. They celebrated, they donated flags to the schools. They sponsored a cooking school. They gave food for the needy. They organized a community choir, an anti-litter campaign, spelling bees. They planted trees everywhere. One of the things they did was they went and inspected the jail for how women were being treated in the jail. And they sponsored health exams for children. So, and we have a couple of firsts, the first person to do this. Stephen stole my thunder and mentioned one of them, Lucille Watson, organized and this was later on, y'all, but the school lunch program in Paulding County, and then Richard Russell, I think, was our senator, and he invited her to come to Washington and talk about her ideas to them up there, and then before you knew it, there was a law, and it was a nationwide school lunch program, so she was that first. We've always heard that Ms. McGarity was the first woman to register to vote in Paulding County. I've heard that there were some few people who think somebody else might have been the first person to vote, first woman to vote.
Officer said that Miss Irma was the first person to vote.
That kind of goes together.
Yeah,
That is,
it does.
maybe McGarity might have been the first one to register. Anyway, so there was a big push to get women registered. Now, I think suffrage went through in 1920. Women didn't vote here until 22 because apparently that's how long it took men in Paulding County to catch up to the new law.
Political.
Political.
They don't want to give up that control.
Okay, so they built the clubhouse. Then they put barbed wire around it, and eventually, I think by the 1930s, they had to start locking the bathroom at night. And then the key, I think, was left at Viva Bird's house. so you could get in when you needed to. Let's see. Oh, this is just one little aside. And this just shows you how quickly the Dallas Women's Club jumped into everything that was going on. So by 1926, we hosted the 7th District meeting. I believe y'all, Joanne, you'll recognize the Methodist Church. Of course, the clubhouse wasn't big enough for the district meeting, but anyway, that's a picture of all those ladies who came to the district meeting in 1926. Yeah. See why it was at the church.
Was that at the First Baptist Church?
First Methodist.
First
I
Methodist?
think it's First Methodist. And that makes sense too, because that's right behind the clubhouse.
Yes.
That assumes one that burned in the 1940s. And then was rebuilt. So, in 1927, Mrs. A.L. Bartlett purchased the land the clubhouse is on. And in 1966, I think is when Mr. McGarity passed away. Is that right, y'all? 1966. That's what I'm assuming. Because what I read was a letter that Ms. McGarity wrote to the club in January of 1967, thanking us, the club, for the memorial, whatever we had done for Mr. McGarity when we were in the process. Ms. McGarity never stopped teaching and leading. So in her thank you note to us after her husband died, she took the opportunity to remind us of all the things that he had done for the club. And she said in that note that it was his idea to have Ms. Bartlett buy the property from the county. Naomi said it was the county or the city. For Ms. Bartlett to buy the property and immediately donate it to the Women's Club. And she sold it to us for $5. She bought it from the county for $500 and sold it to us for $5 the same day, I think. April 1927. But she reserved this little 20 by 20 corner of it to put a statue of her husband, Judge Bartlett, on. And we have some things here that help describe why Judge Bartlett deserved the statue, and he was a wonderful person. He also did a lot for the Women's Club and for the community. I don't know that Mrs. A.L. Bartlett, I'm sorry, I don't know her. This was so frustrating to me about everybody being referred to by their husband's names, is I don't know their first names, But Mrs. A.L. Bartlett's daughter was Ruth Bartlett, later Hutchins, who was, I think, a charter member of the club, maybe the second president of the club. But I don't know that Mrs. Bartlett was ever a member. I didn't see her on any list. Never mind, she did a lot with the club. So as I say, she purchased that property and then donated it to us, reserving that little corner for the statue. Let's see. Where is that? Oh, this is the resolution that the Women's Club did about the Bartletts. Who deserved the statue. Okay, I'm just gonna put this one on the, oh no, I know, this is a letter, this is a report that was done from the Women's Club at the end of the year, and it lists all of those little projects that we did that you probably don't need to read. But it also says, the club is received as a gift from Mrs. A.L. Bartlett, Dallas, in her desire to perpetuate the memory of her late husband, Colonel A.L. Bartlett. Colonel means he was a lawyer, or a judge, anyway, probably not a military colonel. A deed to the lot on which the clubhouse stands. A monument is being erected by Mrs. Bartlett on the clubhouse grounds and will be unveiled with fitting ceremonies at an early date. And it was a year or so later. That was This is a picture of the first 6 presidents of the club. And what we have in the clubhouse is, these are 8x10s framed. I wanted to bring them, but they're too heavy. So, yeah, that's pictures of some of our first presidents. And I wrote the names on the back. Some of them, I don't know their first names. I don't know their husband's names. So, let's see. So through 1929, so it's still in the 1920s, y'all, the club just continued with community beautification, health projects, school projects, women's, children's improvement, continued as that, and then did that fitting ceremony for Judge Bartlett. We also sponsored a junior club and the Dallas Garden Club, which I think was it? Y'all, you were in the Garden Club, weren't you, Joanne? Was it organized as early as the 1920s? Yeah, so it came, as I understand, it came out of the Women's Club is taking credit for the Garden Club coming out of the Women's Club. So. Let's see, so moving to the 1930s. So in February of 1930, they voted to give free of charge the use of the clubhouse to any civic or church organization for social affairs, provided there was no dancing and no card play, and provided they left it clean. No dancing and no card play. Otherwise, you can use it for free.
That was a heavy Methodist
there was a
moral clause, wasn't it?
Yes, yes. Okay, here's just a little interesting thing that brings up somebody else in the community. March 26th and 27th, 1930, all the proceeds from the picture show, which I guess was where the Dallas Theater is now, were donated by Wendell Welch to the club for the Tallulah Falls School. Now the Tallulah Falls School, and I'm going to give you several examples of, I refer to them as McGarrett as a force of nature. The Dallas Women's Club has been a force of nature. Is that, we decided to do something, we just did it, So the Tallulah Falls School, which is it Tallulah Falls, Georgia? Anyway, North Georgia, near Tacoma.
Tallulah Gorge.
Tallulah Gorge, yeah, it's kind of on the other side of the highway from there. Is owned by the Georgia Federation of Women's Clubs. And as I understand it, it's the only school like that that's owned by a civic organization. But Bessie Lipscomb, I think was her name. I think she was vacationing in the mountains or something. Anyway, she was up there in the mountains, and she just noticed the needs of the children in the mountains, that they didn't have adequate education, they didn't have books, and she said something should be done about this. She happened to be president of the state, the Georgia Federation of Women's Clubs at the time, and so she said, okay, do whatever, it was about maybe 300 clubs. We're going to start this school, and for all these years and years and years, part of our dues of every women's club member in the state of Georgia goes to support to support Tallulah Falls School, and that's how that school is run. It was just for the area mountain children at the time. But now kids come from all over the world. And it's known, I think, as a place where kids can come that need to go to boarding school because there's some problem in their family, or their parents work overseas, I guess there are probably some missionary kids there. But anyway, a lot of the students there, there's some reason that they need to be in boarding school, that they are not living with their families. I said Bessie Lipscomb, it's Mary Ann Lipscomb, sorry. And that school was founded in 1909, but you know, as soon as our Dallas Club was founded, we jumped right in with Tallulah Falls School. And apparently some, like Wendell Welch, the rest of the community was in with it too. Let's see, here's something that in 1936, the club voted to organize a WPA library. And WPA stands for either Works Progress Administration or Work Projects Administration. Have y'all heard that? I don't know what the official meaning for WPA is. Apparently it's referred to two different ways. But anyway, it has to do with the Depression. Pulling us out of the Depression and just creating jobs for people. So there were funds, apparently. And this is one of those times they said, we need a library, here we go, we'll get the funds. Books were donated for the public library that was housed in the clubhouse. So by the time I got there, and I'm assuming this is the way it was to start with, by the time I got there, you'd walk in the front door, and to the left was the club meeting room, and to the right was just shelves and shelves and shelves and shelves of books. By 1937, so this is a year later, the book collection had grown from 4 to 1,020. So the club itself had a little collection of books, and then they got donations from far and wide. So, let's see, Joanne, you've been around, or anybody that's been around a little bit longer than me, do you remember anything else about that original library?
I just remember that the first book was entitled Vines and Grasses.
Vines and Grasses.
Which the ladies donated the books.
And it was the only public library in Paulding.
Yeah. So the only public library in Paulding County for a long time, till 1979, as we know. And that first book, Vines and Grasses, and I said the list of the books is in that little spiral notebook on the table, and Vines and Grasses, I wonder if it's the top one, I didn't look at it back here. Vines and Grasses may be the first one on the list. Although I believe what's on the right, you can look at it, I believe what's on the right is the Dewey Decimal designation for it. Yeah. Let's see. Okay, so the 1930s, and you can just tell from the things that were going on. People say, "Okay, did you just have tea parties and everybody wore gloves and hats and stuff?" And there were some tea parties. There was a lot of cooking meals and serving meals to other groups. I think some of those were fundraisers. Serving meals to men's groups, to church groups, to whatever. Fair, I think the club was in charge of some fair. That was one way they raised money to build the clubhouse way back in the 20s. But you can tell by reading the minutes kind of what the atmosphere of the country was. So in the 1930s, times were hard. So there were fewer parties, and there was relief work done. The club promoted low-cost and free health clinics. That were just things that were the kind of things that were really needed in the 1930s. Now, we come to the 1940s. Let's see, what are we up to? I can't remember. See, I can't read these dates on here. We're not in the 1940s, but anyway, these are club presidents that might be up to the 50s. So as I look through the minutes of the 1940s, you can just sense the stress going on, the determination to keep doing our projects and to keep kind of some sense of normalcy. So there was still talk of how you run your home, you know, that kind of thing. But there's much less celebration and much more serious topics for the programs that were at club meetings. So some of the time, like in June, okay, this is June, this is for December 1941. June 1941, the speaker talked about home defense and the hope that the U.S. would not have to engage in armed conflict. She didn't get a wish. She noted that if Germany was defeated, the U.S. would become the controlling nation in the world, which tells me that they all considered the possibility that Germany would win. Think about that. So that was their mentality back then. But they didn't know who was going to win that war. And in June, they didn't know whether we were going to be in the war or not. But they still talked about in their reports and stuff, they talked about the broad impact that the federated women's clubs, now this is the General Federation nationwide, General Federation of Women's Clubs had on the welfare program, and this is more local, the state and local. TB hospital, they worked with handicapped children, they did training schools for boys and girls, schools for the deaf and the blind. That was this one, Cave Spring, and then the school for the blind in Macon. Various clinics, for example, there was one where you could go get your typhoid and diphtheria shot for 10 cents. Now by 1942, of course this is after December 7th, 1941, the talk centered on the Red Cross, saving scrap metal, sale of war bonds, and then honoring the local boys who were in the armed service, and they were referred to every time as boys. The boys who were serving in the armed service. Now, there was a little crisis in 1943. The WPA funds for the library stopped. And I think, y'all correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't the war pull us out of the Depression? So,
Pretty much.
yeah. So I figured that's why the WPA project ended. So then we're going, okay, we were using those funds to run the little library in the club building. So the club began raising funds to keep that library open, because I think we were, by that time, we may have been paying somebody to work there. And there and somewhere else I read, until we were able to convince the county to give us some funds. Anyway. Now also, in 1943, here's another typical example of the way the women's club operated, maybe the way the women operated. So for many years, the Dallas City Cemetery had been unkempt. And in fact, somewhere in the minutes from 1920s, 1921, I think, we were protesting cattle roaming in the cemetery. Trash being thrown out, but cattle roaming in the cemetery, you know. And there was reference to an organization, okay, that's in this article. And I think I figured out, what's the name of this? The Service Club. If any of you had ancestors in the Service Club?
Yeah, I did.
The men's club? Okay, they dropped the ball. So they, I'm just saying. So they had said, we're going to take care of the cemetery, we're going to do it, and in this newspaper article, Stephen, you can paste this around, it's embarrassing to you, but they dropped the ball. And not just them, but over and over people had said, oh, we've got to clean up the cemetery, we've got to keep it up, this has got to be done.
Guys usually do drop the ball.
It didn't happen. So here's what happened when the women's club got involved. Well, okay, anyway. In 1943, the club made a move that was typical of the way the women operated. So for many years, like I said, the cemetery had been unkept, had been discussed and worked on sporadically through all these years. Okay, so the newspaper clipping says the matter was brought up at a meeting and the club promptly undertook to fire the opening gun in the campaign by appointing a committee. Now, you know, folks, I think committees sometimes get a bad rap. You just kind of laugh, committee, those committees don't do anything. Okay, you don't understand a woman's club committee, particularly one that might have maybe a lady on it. So, you just have to understand this is how things happen. So club members orchestrated contacting the family members of everybody buried in the cemetery for a thorough cleanup of the grounds and the individual lots, and raised the money needed from individuals, organizations, and the government to employ a caretaker. So that was the plan, the two-step plan. Number one, contact everybody, has somebody there, and those people need to come clean up those individual plots. And then hired people to clean up the general grounds, to get it in tip-top shape, and then hire a caretaker who, one person, could take care of it from then on. And by the way, contributions were solicited, and they were to be mailed to Mrs. Frank Welch, Dallas, Georgia. That was her address.
We got to it.
It got to her. Mail to Mrs. Frank Welch, Dallas, Georgia. Okay, so that was 1943. In 1946, I don't have that clipping. Anyway, there's a clipping that gives evidence of what happened. And there was a dinner on the grounds, a humongous celebration day. Everybody come. The cemetery was beautiful, and they named the caretaker. So, yeah, I'm just saying this. What'd you say?
We need to do that again.
Oh, we need to do it again. Yeah. Well, I say, I haven't heard anything about the cemetery committee for a long time, so at some point, I guess the women did drop the ball too. But I will say
I'm
also.
on that committee.
Okay.
Actually, at that time, remember, just that top of that hill was the city cemetery. That lower part down there,
That's right.
Yeah, that's
came
what it
on later, and it was private and all the privately owned.
Yeah, and that reminds me, one of the things was in the article about what in 1946, when it was so beautiful, was that there was a road that you could actually drive or walk to get up to the top. So apparently, if you know how steep that is, think about trying to get up there without that road. There was also talk about, I guess it was the first grave up there, and something about Boxwood.
There was a lady, 1852,
1852.
It used to be long.
It is.
It's
still.
Yeah, I saw a letter, I think, from her family saying, can you get the yucca out of there? We were supposed to have boxwood, but not yucca. Anyway, and I was hoping Andrea Anderson, she said she would be here today. I think her mother, let's see now, we saw her aunt, I think, was in Ms. Lawrence. She joined the club way back, if you look at any of these lists. She was maybe not a charter member, but within the first year or two. And then her mother, Ms. Anderson, joined, I think, maybe by the late 20s. She was, and Ann Vinson said that she might come too. Anyway, her mother joined way back there, and both of them told us that they could remember their mothers going to women's club meetings way back, because we're from the 70s, y'all. We don't know what we can't remember anything that happened in the 50s or 60s. But if Ann and Andrea are here, they might remember what their mamas said. Anyway, I think Miss Fleeman, their Ann's mother, Miriam Fleeman, might have joined by the 40s or something. She was involved in it. So, and some of the names that you'll see on these lists over here, by the 40s, the Grahams, Marchmonts, Kroger, Boggs, Henderson, Klontz, Morris, Ragsdale, Hay, Watson, Matthews, Lee, Crew. I think Crew actually was before the 40s. Did I say Watson already? Cooper, Adair, Bentley, Foster, Birch, Colquitt, names that that were still around when we joined, but from way on back there. So that's the 40s. Now we're up
Sharon,
to
a lot of those ladies were teachers too, because personally I had several of them as my teachers.
I saw a letter somewhere. No, I think it was a posting on one of the Facebook pages from somebody who said, does anybody have a picture of Susie and Elva Gordon, who never married? They were some spinster sisters, I guess you call them. Want to know if anybody had a picture of them. They were that person's teachers. And, you know, I see their names everywhere. Miss Elba, I think was secretary maybe when I joined the club. And I see their names everywhere, but I don't know that we have pictures. But anyway, so we're coming on up to the 1950s. So the list of departments of work in the club, like I said, we were involved in everything. The list of here's a copy of a yearbook from 1952, 53. And one thing that I think is interesting about this is in that yearbook they listed the charter members and also the people that were that joined the first year, and the past presidents. So that's kind of cool. And I made a copy of that. You can see from the copy that the actual yearbook is very fragile. So the departments of work back then were very similar to what we were doing all in the 70s, 80s, 90s when we were all real active in the club, and even coming forward to what the Georgia Federation of Women's Clubs, what they all work on now. This is from the 50s. Citizenship and public affairs, the American home life, education, fine arts, international relations, legislation, public welfare, Tallulah Falls School, gardens and conservation, the library, and the cemetery, just to name a few. And you can see how, we have real interesting programs. In fact, every newspaper article, which I'm sure was put in there by maybe McGarity, says the Women's Club had a very interesting program. And that's a lot of stuff to talk about. So we had lots of interesting programs. One difference that I noticed was that there seemed in the old days to be a very active music committee. And the other day when we were at my house looking at all those old minutes and stuff, Marcia Rauscher was looking at some of his old stuff, and she said, there were plays. They wrote plays and performed the plays at club meetings. And there was singing. There was singing at the beginning. There was singing at the end. There were groups that came in. There was just lots and lots of singing. And a lot of you probably remember singing at the courthouse. There would be these things. And it must have something to do with it. They didn't have television. And nowadays, everybody's just stuck on social media. But whether you could sing or not, I suppose you sang. And that was a big part of their entertainment. So, okay, and we talked about Miss Lucille Watson and all of that, and then Miss McGarity, and I just, all through it, you can just see the effects of Miss McGarity's leadership on the club. Until she died in 1987 at age 96, and I think she was still having an influence on a lot of us at that time. Okay, we're up to the 1960s. So some of our club presidents in the 60s were Orly Sanders, Maybelle McGarity. That was her 5th term in the 1960s. And this is kind of funny. I don't think I passed it around, but the thank you note that she wrote after her husband died. The very last thing, I thought it was real interesting because it tells what all he did for the club and the community. But at the very end of it, I don't know why she said this, but she said, one of the last things he said to, later things that he said to her, was that maybe the club would have been better off if she hadn't stayed president so long. What a thing to say to your I don't know. She was not president again after that. But of course she was still in charge. So anyway, they must have had an interesting relationship. Because that is all about what all he did, but you just had to figure that it came from him to the community, but it came from her to him. So, anyway. So those is, let's see, Elizabeth McCoon, these are our presidents in the 60s. Ms. Paul Austin, do you know, anybody know her first name? Who was that? Marjorie Hay was a district president. Now several of our club presidents were district presidents. Of course, Ms. McGarity was district president a couple of times, I think. Ms. Ralph?
Sharon, Marjorie Hay went on to be the first head of the Chamber of Commerce. She took a gratuitous amount of money, but she was the person that ran it. You had the volunteers that were president, but she ran the show there in the 60s.
Yeah, cool.
Almost gratuitously.
Let's see, others who served as district presidents, Ms. Ralph Butler and Lucille Watson. And it's just a little sidebar, also Jack Waldrop's mother. So she was involved in the Federated Club in Rome, and she was one of the district presidents too. I can't remember her first name. She died not too long ago. Now, Miss Julian Babb spoke at a meeting, and I assume that's Sarah Babb.
It is.
You spoke in, no, because you just referred to it by her husband's name. And you know, y'all love my husband, but I just want people to know I'm Sharon. Hello. Marcia Rauscher pointed out that we were the ones who changed that tradition of referring to everybody by their husband's names let's use our own names. Anyway. So anyway, Sarah Babb came and spoke at a meeting, and she paid tribute to the Dallas Women's Club for its influence in her life growing up through their work with youth in the community. So that was kind of cool. Let's see, 1961, the Education Department talks about the library of the clubhouse in the little library in the clubhouse becoming part of the West Georgia Regional Library. And how we covered all the library's expenses until we convinced the county ordinary to levy a tax to supplement the funds. So we finally got a little help doing that. In 1962, Ms. McGarity hosted a tea. Here's the, I'm sorry. This is that thank you note from Ms. McGarity. And let's see. Oh, let me backtrack just a minute, I forgot this. This is also from the 1960s. 1963, this is executive committee recommendations. And there were a couple of those, one about the cemetery, one about the fundraiser. This is the third one. Since there has been an offer to buy the clubhouse for said buyer's use as a private office, the board recommended that the clubhouse not be sold, but kept always as a cultural center, as a symbol of the united efforts of the united efforts of the women of Dallas, whose objective had been the intellectual, quote, and this is also in Ms. McGarity's history, the intellectual and moral development of the members and aiding in the work of improving our town and school. At that time in the 1920s, there may have been only one school. I've seen a picture of that school, which was where Herschel Jones is now. I think that was the Dallas Schools.
Up on the hill.
Up on the hill. Where?
Up on the hill.
Up on the hill. Well, now that's where Dallas High School was, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Well, first it was,
But all the K through 12 was there.
K through 12, that two-story square building.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and then, because I remember the Dallas High School when I came here. I think Herschel Jones was already built at the Dallas High School. It might have been the development.
Yeah,
center.
I went there to elementary school, yeah.
Okay, anyway, so they recommended that, so the first two motions were approved. The second, let's see, the recommendation, there was a motion and a second that the third recommendation, this is about selling the clubhouse to an individual person who wanted to put his office there, that it be delayed until more information could be developed. It was never mentioned again. So that went in the round file, I think. It was not, that I found in the minutes, it was never brought up again. And the clubhouse, of course, was not so. Let's see, we up to the 70s now? Okay. So there was, okay, so there, we have notes in the minutes from 1971, I think, where there was some kind of a study, and Joanne, I think you read these part of the minutes the other day. There was a study by the, some kind of planning, I don't know if it was Coosa Valley Planning Commission, they've been around in the 70s. And they were promoting growth and expansion in the county. And they did a study about expanding the library, and their conclusion was that was not a good location in which, where the library could be expanded. And if you think about it, there's not that much room to make the building bigger, and there's no place to park. I don't know if they're.
That is landlocked.
Yeah. So by that time, I'm sure the Masonic building was built. This Judge Bartlett's statue was there. And I don't know if, what's City Hall right now that was bank, I'm not.
It wasn't good savings alone.
Savings and loan, that might have been built by that time, it was right behind there. Anyway, they said it was not a good place. So that report was brought to a club meeting, and Joanne, you would have been president by then, would you?
No,
I wasn't president.
When did you become president? 74? When did you become president?
Probably early 70s.
Yeah.
I can't remember.
Yeah. And it's on here, but you can't read it. Okay. And this is our pictures of presidents from the 60s and 70s, right up through Joanne. Well, anyway, that report was brought to us, and I just wanted you to tell the group what you said in that meeting, Joanne.
Well, there was discussion about the library and being landlocked and all of those things you mentioned. And I just said, well, why don't we just build a new one?
that's what she said.
In that tone of
Build
voice.
a new one.
Why don't we just build a new one?
And everybody said, I don't think Miss McGarry ever really got on the bandwagon about that one. It was so close to her heart. And so we decided that we would just build a new one anyway. And we started baking cakes and having fashion shows and Christmas dances and all kinds of things to raise money. And we raised $15,000. And J.D. Blackstock was the commissioner at the beginning of this. And he approached Dr. Brawley about donating the property. And that this
Where we're sitting.
Where we're sitting. And so we just, of course, we were not an organization that could, that would be supposed to be in charge of something like that. And so the regional librarian got involved, and she was instrumental in getting a matching grant. And by then, we had gone so far that we couldn't turn back now. And so the county agreed to match the building funds that we had collected. And so that's how it was built. And then it's continued to be a part of the regional library.
And now we have four libraries. So for a while, this was the only one,
So nobody said no, we're doing it.
Yeah, so in case you couldn't all hear what she said with that club meeting where they said this location is not a good place to expand, Joanne just said, let's just build one.
And we did.
And we did. But with raising money with fashion shows, several Christmas balls, I don't know if the Vagabond Marionettes came in by that time. That was another big fundraiser that we did. And this clipping says we challenged other organizations. There's Joanne, Adele Lawrence, and Agnes Hay talking to J.B. Blackstock.
Lawrence was our treasurer at that time.
Yeah, to challenge the county and other organizations to get on board. And as Joanne said, not every member of the Women's Club was on board, but by the time we started having those fundraisers, it required everybody to do it and raise something like $15,000 to start with. Started with that $500 seed money, and then a grant through the regional library, and then matching grant from the county. So that was mid-70s something, I can't remember when that started, 70?
6.
Yeah, 77, okay, so here notes that Ms. Edith Foster from the West Georgia Regional came in 1975 and talked to us about how to get the funds, what we need to do. And then let's see. Christmas ball fashion show, anyway, lots of stuff to raise money. And then the library was built and opened in 1979. And Dee brought a wonderful scrapbook. I think there's several albums for the library, but this first one that's right there where Stephen said it concerned a lot. There's a lot in there about the women's club's involvement in the beginning of forming that committee and raising the money to build this library that we're in. Let's see. Two other little notes. Other things that wasn't the only thing we did in the 70s. We also gave money to the nursing home for beauty parlor equipment. This is near and dear to ladies' hearts, y'all. Just because you're in the nursing home doesn't mean you don't want your hair to look nice. So we did that, and then I had note that there was an extremely interesting program in 1972 given by Stephen Krug about his travels. And this would be before your time, Linda, right?
I think so.
But I think we got married the same year, so I don't think you were married in 72, but anyway, Stephen Krug came in and talked to us. Let's see.
I forgot about that.
The minutes don't forget that. Let's see, okay, we're up to the 1980s, y'all. We're making progress. Excuse me. I have some clippings from the newspaper. And if you look at the top of the, written on these clippings, so the scrapbook over here is so fragile that what I did was I just took pictures with my phone, and that's where a lot of the clippings are not actual clippings, they're photographs of what Ms. McGarity pasted in the scrapbook. And so up at the top you'll see it says number 23, Miss Andrea Anderson. Miss Andrea was the 23rd president of the Dallas Women's Club, May 10, 1984. Not sure when it's May, but anyway, maybe that's when she was elected. Anyway, so this article is about being a sponsoring organization for Paulding Meadows Arts and Crafts Festival. So along with some of our other projects like this is another one we just said, okay, let's just do this thing. I'm pretty sure Joanne was instrumental in this one too. And I'm not sure where the idea came from for the arts and crafts, and Dee, of course, Dee is in charge of the festival pretty much, has been for years. Where'd that idea come from?
Actually, it was a group that got together. We used to have a county fair on and when that ceased, they sold that property and there wasn't anywhere to have a fair anymore and do all the things that had taken place there. Well, there was a group that got together, Miss Irma Austin,
Earl Duncan?
Earl Duncan, Sarah Ravenbuilder, that's a couple. And we went to Powers Crossroads to see how they were set up, which was a festival site. And we decided that we would do our own festival. What we did, in the beginning we only had like 9 organizations. Right now we have 11 sponsoring organizations. They're all nonprofit and here in Paulding County. We send out applications every year and for the booth fee. And that money from the booth fees is what we use to produce the show. All right, our workers are coming from these 11 sponsoring organizations. The pay for their work is an equal share of the gate receipts. And over the years, it's been pretty much, they average between anywhere from $1,500 to $2,500 each for each organization. But this will be our 43rd year. We started out with 35 vendors, and we started out at Raccoon Creek, and we were there for 2 years. And it got a little bit bigger, and then we went to Vera Hunt's place out on the highway, and we were there for 5 years. And then the county purchased the park, 125 acres, out in the middle of nowhere, but that was all right. Somewhere better than nowhere. And at that point, we left Hunt Meadows and went to the Paulding Meadows Park, which really is the Earl Duncan Memorial Park at Paulding Meadows. But this will be our 43rd year. Woman's Club has always been a sponsor of it. They do the burgers and dogs until we recently gave that up to the high school. But we have 4 booster clubs from all band booster clubs from 4 of the high schools are sponsors. Then we have the Rotary, the 4-H, the Boys and Girls Club, the Dallas Women's Club.
Math teachers.
Math teachers, I think that's 11. But we keep it going. We only bring in another sponsor when someone drops off. But it has provided us with some funds every year, enough, to do something with it. Like Sharon was saying, we had the burgers and dogs, and I think most of that was like we were supporting the media centers, especially at the new schools, because when the new schools opened up, the media centers were required to have so many books in there for each child. So that helped them there. We helped them that way. But it's been going on, and I love it. I mean, everybody say, "Oh, say, why do you do that?" I love it. You meet so many people. This year we will have 265 vendors and 20 food vendors.
And we've been full,
And we
full
have-
for a while.
Oh, we've been full.
Yeah, because I met somebody the other day who was interested, and she said, and I said, oh, no, they've been full.
It's been a good thing. But the Women's Club was one of the instrumental organizations who went for this. I think Women's Club pretty much has been for anything that would raise enough money to help us get something out to the kids. Everything you see at Paulding Meadows, those gate receipts, those organizations have a program where that money goes back to the kids. Like the bands, they use a lot of that money to get band uniforms that some of the kids can't afford. They have scholarship funds. 4-H helps a lot of, I think we have a mid-class band that they got for caregivers around. Yeah, that's what Paulding Meadows is about.
What's the date this year?
The 10th and the 11th.
Well, I have an
It's
important question.
always,
Do you have tickets?
yes.
Tickets are
It is always the weekend after Labor Day. We have the competition from the old lady, but they're so far away that we don't worry about them. But and I think that most of the community around, we're up there pretty high on reputation ladder where people, want to get in our show. In fact, we have a list of about 40 people waiting to get in, but that only comes about if we have cancellation, then we don't have anyone else.
Steve, was that 1980 that you said starting?
We had a show in 1980, and you have to be careful there because you want to go 10, 20, 30. But since 1990 was actually our 11th year, so it always gets confusing, but this will be our 43rd year.
Okay. Are we allowed to sell tickets here, Stephen?
No. This is the library rules. He would know.
I know, but
Okay.
the library don't allow that to handle anyone else's
No,
money.
not
It
yet.
just makes sense,
I'm sorry.
Maybe in the parking lot.
Yeah.
You can promote it.
Yeah, tickets are.
Each
two-
organization,
yeah.
excuse me,
Well, tickets are $2 ahead of time and $3 at the gate, so.
and each organization, each sponsor has to sell, or you're responsible to pay for 200 tickets. You get 50 cents off it, $2. But, and then, the people, we have non-sponsors who have food concessions, and they have to sell 100 tickets. And, the food concessions goods are $100. You see, the money they rake in, can't. I think one year the smoothie people made about $4,000. See, and the 4-H has a deal with them where they get 40% of that, and the guys that are working booths, they get the rest of it, but 40%, and they don't do anything. But 40% of 4,000 is pretty good.
Yeah. So I just can kind of hear Joanne's voice back then when we were 79, 80, saying, well, I think I can bring my frying pan and we'll just have burgers. And I think we did it in electric skillet, didn't we?
We did.
To start with.
Out at Raccoon Creek.
At Raccoon Creek. We advanced to charcoal grills and then gas grills, and in fact, there's still a humongous gas grill up there in the clubhouse, and a small grill too, so if anybody knows anybody who would like to buy that, we could sell it. But anyway, that's just been, the hamburger and hot dog booth has been a philanthropic project. I think I said that in the beginning, that where we've done all the work for it and then we just give all the money away. But, let's see, also in the 80s, we worked a bunch of blood drives. Here's a picture from the paper. A blood drive. We had lung association, like smoking cessation programs. We donated the Special Olympics. We did a bunch of Vagabond marionettes shows, and we would have the children bussed from all over the county. I think most, where are they usually, at Hiram Elementary?
Jones Middle School is what it is now. But then, that's where I remember it going to.
Yeah, so I remember being at Hiram too, maybe it was both places.
Yeah, it could have been.
Yeah.
Different years, we would have it somewhere.
Yeah, the kids would be bussed there for that marionette show. And let's see, we formed a civic auditorium committee. So this was before the, I guess it's called the Civic Center. It's across from what used to be the jail. I know, y'all have been around for a while, but people who've only been here for 10 years or so, it's so frustrating to say, well, that was near the old post office. No, not the old post office, but the old post office. Anyway, where there used to be, the pure station, next door to the whatever, and where
At the red light.
at the red light. And I would say in 1974, when I moved here, there was one red light at one intersection, one in the middle that pointed 4 ways.
In the county.
In the whole county, one red light. In 1974, not that long ago, we've grown. But anyway, we thought the county needed an auditorium, a good performing arts center, and raised money for that for years. I think it started in 1985 with that. And the Civic Center that eventually got built, I think was not exactly what we had in mind to start with, but it was important and it functions. So that was another project that went on in the 80s. This is just, I thought, a cool picture from 1983 of the past presidents of the club. So there's a group of us together. It's fun. This might be a little older than that. This is a photograph. I think it's a Ways and Means Committee meeting. And Joanne and Dee, maybe y'all look at it and tell there's one person who I can't identify. The person that's between you and Ms. and Cora Colquitt. I'm not sure who that is. Anyway, I think it's Marcia and Mimi Carty and Joanne Yu and Carol Barber and me and Cora. That could be the other person. Yeah. I'm not sure. This is something that was in the paper in 1987, and just a wonderful write-up about Ms. McGarity, just a lot about what she did in the county.
That's when she passed away.
Oh, was it? Oh, yeah, in 87, you're right. Oh, here's another picture of some of us cute folks. Okay. This was an Afghan that we gave away at a club meeting. I'm not sure who made the Afghan, but my mother-in-law won it. So when she moved up to Dallas, she joined the club too. I don't think she was able to come to very many meetings, but she joined. This is 1988. Okay. This was a pledge of money that we made toward the Growing Toward the Future campaign. And I think it was trying to raise money to purchase and restore the Bartlett Hutchins house.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was in the late 80s. Okay, here's Marsha. That's just a picture of some officers getting installed. And here are the latest pictures that we have of club presidents. We're missing the last 3 club presidents, so this goes up through D and E. Here, I think this is a meeting that was held to orient department chairman. Okay, so now we're in the 90s. We've come all the way up to the 1990s, y'all. We're almost in the current century. Anyway, Joanne, you know what? I'm looking at this person and I think it's me, but it may be you, Joanne. If you look at the clothes, I think the profile looks like me, but the clothes look like you. So, wait, you look at it and see if you think it's yourself. Anyway.
Say you or I will probably in there.
Yeah, well, that's true. One of us might have taken each picture, so it might be you in one picture and then the other, but that means we have the same color. Anyway, Joanne and I have kind of been confused for a long time. Just because of our husbands working together. And then people used to call me Sharon Talley and confuse Ken and Jen Talley, and then confuse Joyce and me. Anyway, whatever. So in the 1990s, membership began to decline some, and there were a lot of factors that went on. Stephen mentioned that a lot of our members were teachers, and so we did have our meetings. Mostly our meetings were at 3:30 in the afternoon, so that teachers could come straight from school. Sometimes we conflicted with faculty meetings and such. We tried for a while having a few evening meetings. Sometimes we'd meet daytime and sometimes evening. And the ABWA was founded too, somewhere along in there. The working women began to join other organizations. At some point, the traditionally men's clubs began to be co-ed and taking female members.
Talking about the Rotary Club.
Paulding. The Lions Club was co-ed. I'm not sure about Civic.
We were the only Rotary Club in the southeast that didn't have women in Paulding County. They finally gave in. So we still do lots and lots of projects, and if you take a glance at the reports, and on the far corner of there still are just a gazillion little projects that we're involved in. It's been, since the mid-90s, it's been more financial support. We have a meeting every once in a while. Sometimes we meet over the telephone. One time we met at the assisted living center. We eventually will meet in Canada. Anyway, that brings us full circle. Oh, here's something from the 21st century, and that was us donating $1,000 to Moses Middle School Center, and that had to do with that middle school media center. Jane Callie was in charge of that, helping us with a hamburger hot dog and then giving them all the money. So, I think I might be done. What, do y'all have something to add? And then we can take questions. Joanne, you and Dee want to add anything?
And Brian, do you need them to turn where the camera can see them
No,
and hear them?
that's okay.
Or hear them, just talk loud.
Well, Sharon and Marsha Rauscher have kept it going.
Yeah.
I think they've done all the hard work. I remember that about the time we opened this building, a lot of us were going back to work. We'd been stay-home moms and had time on our hands. But a lot of us were going back to work, and you mentioned several other things that were in competition, really, the business women. Anyway, you all have done the bulk of the work.
Marsha has done the bulk of the work.
In recent years.
far as the, like reports of the club and paying all the bills and stuff, that's Marcia Rauscher. And then as far as keeping us involved in Paulding County, so the money keeps coming in, that's big. I could really,
What was the name of that?
Area Planning Committee.
Area Planning Commission. Gave us a lot of support. They didn't really have funds, and I know I have to get away, but they gave leadership.
Had to pull a lot of weeds in the yard. And she would bring out the switch in a quick minute. But she was very, very influential and didn't get to law school. And I think it's fantastic what y'all have brought today. I heard her talk about these kinds of organizations. She was in numbers of them, as you know. But she mentioned this one many times. It was a big influence in this community, bigger than I probably appreciated. And thank her and all of y'all for doing all that you've done. It's been a great morning to hear all that.
Very interesting, yeah. She definitely instilled in us about teaching and working in the community and volunteering. And I remember all of her writings, and I have a lot of them in my house. I was able to keep, and she always, she was big on telling us how to write things and correcting us if we weren't doing it the right way. And the teacher of her, of course, all her daughters were teachers. My sister's a teacher. I ended up being in the school system, even though that's not the career I picked, but I ended up being in it and loving it. So that she instilled that in all of us. And it's fun and nice to hear things about tenacity, right? She was very, yeah, you're correct.
She started,
Right,
but not going to go away.
right. And I could see when y'all were trying to start this particular building, how that might have been hard for her. But I also know that she was all about whatever the betterment for the community and betterment for children. So I'm sure, she came around. We all love books because of her. So. Thank y'all.
I love this here. I live across the street.
I thought so.
Anybody else have a
One
comment?
of the things that had never occurred to me, I was reading not long ago, a biography of Benjamin Franklin. I've forgotten who the author is, but in explaining that Franklin was credited with starting the first public library in his area, the author went on to comment that this is one of the things that has made the United States unique among nations, is that we've had this tradition of local community libraries. And that astonished me because I just sort of took it for granted. Well, all countries have public libraries. Well, maybe they do now, but they sure didn't years ago. So all kinds of credit goes to the Dallas Women's Club for starting that here. Wonderful.
I want to read something in closing, if that's okay. This is from the Historic Georgia Mothers of the Year, a 200-year book, 1776 to 1976. And the part when Maybelle was the Georgia Mother of the Year, she told her minister at the Methodist Church, I guess what to say, but anyway, this is how it ends on her 2 pages that described her service to the community. It says, the principles that were stressed by Mr. and Mrs. McGarry in rearing their daughters were to believe in God, to understand the importance of moral values, self-reliance, and the value of work and thrift, to respect the rights of others, and to appreciate their heritage. And I think that describes all of the ladies that have been in this organization. It's been, I feel like, kind of, for the most part, the cream of the crop. Ladies in this community over 100 years. And all of you had those attributes that's what makes this country strong, and that's what makes our families strong, and I appreciate that. I would like to tell you, I got lots of Maybelle stories, but one in particular, when I was in the Army in Germany, I used to get the Dallas New Era and the Wall Street Journal to keep my sanity. We got them about 2 weeks late, but nobody read the Wall Street Journal but me and another guy, but everybody read every word of the Dallas New Era. We were in the barracks, and their favorite thing every week, Maybelle then was right, I call her Maybelle, I ain't Maybelle. She wrote the social things that went on in the community, and she was always talking about it, used this same thing every time. She would say, well, so-and-so and so-and-so went to Atlanta and did this, and she would always end it, and then when I was telling, they'd get me to read it to them in the barracks, but everybody knew the ending, and it was in unison what they said, and it says, and a good time was had by all. It was almost a chorus in that group of guys. They were laying in their bunks, and everybody had shared their stories, but this was Maybelle's legacy for Germany on that. Well, thank y'all for coming.
Can I have one more
Yes,
story? One more
please.
story. I took her very frequently to different places, and I would take her to the club meetings. And one time I couldn't. I was honored to give her a eulogy for her at the next district meeting when we had it. And I was talking to her and I said, she went to those meetings. It was her passion. She went to those meetings. And one day I could not go. I forget why I couldn't go. And I called her to tell her I couldn't go. And she told me that was just perfectly all right. She understood that she missed a meeting once. Probably was true.
That's funny.
Happens to everybody.
Well, we'd like to applaud you for this great.